Most people think cash either makes you safe or makes you fall behind, but the truth is far more complicated. You know that feeling when payday hits, your account finally looks alive, and for a moment you breathe a little easier, only to check again 2 days later wondering how everything disappeared so fast. Think about this for a second, because that cycle isn't just stress. It's a signal. It shows how little we understand the role cash plays in our lives. We're told to invest every dollar or save every dollar, and somehow both messages leave us exhausted. Nobody teaches us how much cash we're actually supposed to keep, how much helps us stay afloat, or how much quietly puts us in danger. And here's the part most people completely overlook. Cash isn't lazy. Cash is strategy. It buys time when the world moves too fast. It buys stability when life hits hard, and it buys the freedom to make decisions from clarity instead of panic. In 2025, that matters more than ever, because prices rise faster than paychecks, and uncertainty lasts longer than confidence. The real question isn't whether cash is good or bad, it's whether you're using it the way people who stay calm in every storm already do. And understanding that is where everything starts to change, and where the real story begins in the next section. Why 2025 changed everything about cash. If you look closely at the financial reality Americans are living through in 2025, you start to see why the old rules about cash no longer make sense. Inflation hasn't disappeared, it has simply changed shape. Some months it slows, other months it jumps, but the feeling never fully goes away. You see it every time you buy groceries, and the total rings higher than you expected, or when a simple dinner out somehow costs what a full weekend used to. Housing has become its own kind of puzzle, with rents staying high and mortgage rates refusing to settle back into the comfortable numbers we once took for granted. Even people earning good salaries find themselves double-checking the math each month because one unexpected bill can tilt the whole system. Think about this for a second. It used to be that having a few $1,000s in savings felt responsible. Now it feels like nothing. A car repair, a medical deductible, a missed paycheck, and suddenly that comfortable cushion evaporates. And what makes this even more challenging is the emotional side of it. When prices move unpredictably, people react unpredictably. Some cling to cash so tightly that inflation quietly eats away at it. Others avoid holding cash entirely because they fear missing out on higher returns. Both reactions make sense emotionally, but both can backfire financially. The environment we're in requires something different, something more intentional. Cash can no longer be random. It has to be structured. It has to be purposeful. It has to match the reality of how Americans actually live, with rising expenses, unpredictable markets, and a debt culture that pushes people into stress even when their incomes look strong on paper. The pressure isn't just about math, it's about psychology. When your budget feels squeezed, you start making decisions from fear instead of long-term. You start thinking short-term instead of long-term. You start trying to survive instead of trying to grow. That's why 2025 forces us to rethink cash entirely. Cash isn't just about covering bills, it's about maintaining confidence in an environment designed to shake it. It's about slowing your mind down enough so you don't make emotional decisions in a financial world that constantly tries to trigger your emotions. Here's something most people don't realize. When the economy becomes unpredictable, the people who suffer most are the ones who never built a system around their cash. They depend entirely on hope. They hope prices stabilize. They hope their job stays secure. They hope nothing big goes wrong. Hope is not a strategy. Cash is. And the people who navigate uncertainty the best aren't the richest. They're the most prepared. That preparation comes from understanding that cash isn't wasted potential, it's financial insurance. Not insurance you buy from a company, but insurance you build for yourself. It protects your time, your decisions, your options, and your peace of mind. When you have enough cash, problems become inconveniences. When you don't, inconveniences become crises. And here's the punchline most people overlook. Cash's real power isn't in what it buys, it's in what it prevents. It prevents panic. It prevents bad choices. It prevents being forced into decisions you never wanted to make. When you look at the way Americans are struggling with rising costs, unpredictable markets, and the pressure to keep up, you realize that the question isn't how much cash is ideal in theory. The real question is how much cash keeps you steady in a world that can become unstable overnight. And the deeper insight behind that question, the one that changes how you approach your entire financial life, begins in the next section. The system that finally makes cash make sense. Most people struggle with cash not because they're irresponsible, but because they've never been taught how cash is supposed to function inside a real financial life. Think about this for a second. Every dollar you earn is pulled in 5 different directions the moment it arrives. Bills, debt, groceries, subscriptions, savings, unexpected expenses, and emotional spending all fight for the same limited space. No wonder cash feels chaotic. The real problem isn't that people don't save. The real problem is that most people save without structure. They keep whatever's left over, hope it's enough, and then feel guilty when it isn't. Meanwhile, the financial world tells them 2 opposite things at the same time. Invest everything for the future, but also keep enough cash to survive anything. It's no surprise people end up confused or overwhelmed. The truth is far more practical. Cash only makes sense when each portion of it has a specific purpose. A job, a role. When you transform cash from a lump of money into a system of responsibilities, everything becomes clearer, calmer, and far more manageable. And this is where everything begins to shift. The system that actually works in real American households is built on tiers, not guesses. You start with the foundation, the cash that keeps your daily life operating without friction. This is your immediate buffer. The money you use for groceries, gas, bills, streaming services, takeout nights, and every small expense that keeps your life moving. Most people underfund this tier, which is why they constantly feel anxious. When your everyday cash is too low, every purchase feels risky, every bill feels stressful, and every unexpected cost creates panic. Ideally, you want 1 month of expenses sitting here, not because it's fancy or financial guru approved, but because it stabilizes your emotional decision-making. With this tier solid, you stop reacting to money and start managing it. The second tier is your emergency stability, the money that protects you when life takes a sudden turn. A layoff, a medical bill, a car breakdown, a family emergency, a home repair that can't wait. People underestimate how often life creates financial turbulence. But anyone who has ever been hit with 2 big expenses in the same month knows exactly how fast things can spiral. This tier, usually 3 to 6 months of expenses, isn't about wealth, it's about survival. When this tier is funded, life's chaos becomes manageable instead of devastating. It turns a crisis into an inconvenience. It turns fear into control, and the power of that shift cannot be overstated. But here's the part almost nobody talks about, the tier that separates people who simply stay afloat from people who actually move forward. Opportunity cash. This isn't emergency money. It isn't bill money. It isn't for vacations or daily comforts. It's the money you keep ready for the moment life hands you a chance disguised as inconvenience. Maybe it's a business idea you finally have time to try. Maybe it's a course that advances your skills. Maybe it's a market dip that makes a long-term investment suddenly affordable. Maybe it's a used car priced far below value because someone else urgently needed cash. Opportunity comes fast, and it rarely waits. Most people miss out not because they're unlucky, but because they're unprepared. A small pool of opportunity cash changes that. You're no longer reacting to life, you're positioned to benefit from it. Then there's the long-term reserve, the quiet money that grows in the background. Unlike the first 3 tiers, this one doesn't need immediate access. It doesn't need to be flashy. It doesn't need attention. It exists to give you future stability, future freedom, and future breathing room. People underestimate how powerful slow, consistent, low-drama financial growth can be. It's not about timing markets or chasing trends. It's about giving your future self the gift of less stress and more space. When your long-term reserve exists, you stop thinking about money only in terms of bills and begin thinking in terms of legacy, choices, and long-term resilience. But here's where the real insight emerges. Each of these tiers isn't just financial structure, it's psychological structure. Daily cash lowers stress. Emergency cash lowers fear. Opportunity cash lowers regret. Long-term cash lowers insecurity. When these tiers are balanced, life feels steadier, even if nothing else changes. This is why wealthy households don't just have more money, they have more structure. Their cash is organized, their decisions are intentional, their timelines are longer, and that structure gives them advantages that look like confidence from the outside, but are actually systems on the inside. You don't need millions to access that feeling. You just need a clear design for how your cash functions. Now let's talk about something people almost always overlook. These tiers scale with your reality. Someone earning $50,000 0 cents and someone earning $250,000 0 cents won't use the same amounts, but they use the same principles. The lower your income, the more important your emergency tier becomes. The higher your income, the more important your opportunity tier becomes. The more responsibilities you carry, the more your long-term tier matters. The goal isn't to copy someone else's system. The goal is to build one that moves with your life instead of constantly fighting against it. And here's the punchline that changes everything. Money stress rarely comes from not earning enough. It comes from money not being organized enough. Once you understand that cash must be divided into purpose-driven layers, every financial decision becomes simpler. You know what belongs where, you know what stays untouched, you know when you're safe to take risks and when you're not. Cash becomes clarity instead of confusion. That clarity transforms your financial confidence, your emotional stability, and your long-term progress. But understanding the system is only half the story. To really grasp how these layers transform your life, you have to see how they play out in the real world. And that is exactly where we go next. The story that reveals what cash really does. Let me tell you a story that captures exactly why cash structure matters more than almost anything else in your financial life. It starts with two families living in the same neighborhood, earning similar incomes, driving similar cars, and sending their kids to the same schools. From the outside, you would think their financial lives were nearly identical, but beneath the surface, they were living in two completely different realities, and neither one realized it until the moment life tested them. The first family, the Harris family, lived what most people would call a comfortable lifestyle. They kept up with bills, enjoyed takeout a few nights a week, upgraded their phones regularly, and took 1 or 2 vacations a year. They weren't reckless, they weren't irresponsible, and they certainly weren't living far beyond their means. But they made the same mistake millions of people quietly make. They assumed stability would continue simply because it had so far. Their cash wasn't organized, it wasn't structured, it wasn't divided by purpose. It just existed as one big blurry pool that they dipped into whenever something came up. And everything felt fine, right up until the moment it didn't. When 2024 brought them a sudden job loss combined with an unexpected medical bill and a home repair that couldn't wait, their entire financial world flipped upside down. They had some savings, but not enough in the right places. They had income, but not enough of a buffer. They had a good lifestyle, but no system protecting it. And this is the part that stunned them the most. They weren't broke in the way most people imagine. On paper, they had a solid net worth, retirement accounts, home equity, a decent car, but none of those things could pay a bill on Monday. None could cover the medical deductible due immediately. None could stabilize their mindset while they scrambled to figure out short-term survival. They had wealth on paper, but no liquidity in reality. They were trapped in a position far too many Americans know well: asset rich, but cash poor. And cash poor is not a financial condition. It's an emotional one. It feels like running out of breath. It feels like losing control. It feels like squeezing every dollar for comfort while silently hoping nothing else goes wrong. Their crisis didn't happen because they were irresponsible. It happened because their cash was unprepared for life's unpredictability. Now, just a few houses away lived another family. On the surface, nothing seemed impressive. They drove older cars, they skipped unnecessary upgrades, they planned their purchases carefully. No one envied their lifestyle, but no one pitied it either. Their secret wasn't higher income or better luck, it was structure. Their cash had roles, their savings had layers, their accounts were divided into responsibilities. Bills came from one tier, emergencies came from another, opportunities came from a third, and long-term financial peace came from the last. So when their own household faced a difficult moment, a medical emergency, and a temporary income drop, they didn't collapse emotionally, they didn't scramble, they didn't panic, not because the moment was as stressful, but because their system absorbed the shock before their emotions had to. Their cash prevented chaos. It bought them time. It gave them the ability to think clearly rather than react impulsively. The difference between the two families wasn't intelligence. It wasn't luck. It wasn't income. It was liquidity. One family had to reorganize their entire life to survive the storm. The other simply shifted between tiers without breaking their rhythm. Think about that. Both families earned well, both had savings, both believed they were doing fine, but only one had cash positioned to protect them when the world suddenly demanded breathing room. Here's the punchline most people miss. Stability does not come from how much you earn or even how much you own. Stability comes from how quickly you can access the right amount of cash when life tests you. The Harris family didn't fail financially. They simply never designed their cash to defend them. And the second family didn't succeed because they were frugal. They succeeded because their cash had a purpose before anything went wrong. And this leads us to a larger truth about real American life. The cash you keep is not about luxury, wealth, or privilege. It is about reducing panic when reality shifts suddenly. It's about eliminating the need to make desperate choices under pressure. It's about giving yourself the psychological stability that turns a crisis into an inconvenience instead of a disaster. Because here's the part that changes everything. Most people don't fall behind financially because of slow erosion. They fall behind because of sudden impact. One major disruption can reverse years of progress. One moment of panic can undo years of discipline. And those moments don't care how hard you worked. They only care whether you prepared. That preparation doesn't come from intelligence or prediction. It comes from liquidity. When you have a structured cash system, you don't just survive hardship. You get to move through it with composure. You get to say no to bad decisions. You get to avoid high-interest debt. You get to maintain your dignity in moments when the world tries to shake it. Most importantly, you get to protect your future from being rewritten by one unlucky month. The story of these two families exists everywhere. You've seen it at work, in your neighborhood, among your friends, maybe even in your own home. It's the story of how cash reveals the reality beneath the surface, the difference between looking stable and actually being stable. And now that we've seen how this plays out in real life, we can finally talk about the deeper lessons hidden inside it. Those lessons are what turn cash from a safety net into a roadmap. And that is exactly where we go next. The lessons that turn cash into control. When you look closely at the difference between people who stay financially stable and people who constantly feel one step away from disaster, you start to realize it isn't luck or intelligence or income that separates them, it's the way they treat their cash. Not the amount they have, but the structure, the discipline, and the mindset behind it. And once you understand these principles, something shifts permanently in the way you make financial decisions. The goal isn't perfection, the goal is clarity, because clarity is what turns money from a source of anxiety into a source of stability. These lessons aren't theories. They're the patterns that show up again and again in the lives of people who navigate uncertainty without fear, who build stability quietly, and who move toward long-term wealth without needing extreme luck or perfect timing. And the first lesson is simpler than most people expect. Every dollar needs a job. Most financial stress doesn't come from not having enough money. It comes from not knowing what your money is supposed to do. When cash sits together in one big pile, it becomes emotional. You make decisions based on mood, impulse, or fear. You overspend because the money looks available. You underspend because nothing is separated. But the moment you assign roles, daily expenses, emergency cushion, opportunity pool, long-term reserve, your cash stops feeling chaotic. It becomes organized, purposeful, calming. Money you shouldn't touch becomes money you don't touch. Money you can spend becomes money you spend without guilt, and money meant for the future grows without being sabotaged by the present. Structure isn't restriction. Structure is liberation. It frees you from confusion, from hesitation, from the mental exhaustion of constantly asking, "Can I afford this?" When cash has a job, you finally know the answer. The second lesson is equally powerful. Liquidity is strength, not weakness. People underestimate how often financial disasters come, not from income loss, but from liquidity loss. You can have a solid job, good investments, high income, and still feel fragile if you don't have cash accessible when you need it. Liquidity isn't about holding cash for show. It's about having the ability to act when life demands action. It's about absorbing the unexpected without losing control. It's about staying in the game long enough for success to catch up to you. People who collapse financially don't fail because they're irresponsible. They fail because the timing of life didn't match the timing of their cash. Liquidity protects you from that mismatch. It gives you breathing room when the world tightens. And here's the punchline: being liquid doesn't make you less invested in your future, it makes you more resilient in the present. The third lesson is one very few people understand. Cash buys time, and time is the foundation of every good financial decision. Most financial mistakes happen when people run out of time. A layoff forces them to take on debt, a bill forces them to liquidate investments at the worst moment, a crisis forces them to choose survival instead of strategy. Cash is the antidote to that pressure. It buys you time to think, time to adjust, time to react. Time is the invisible asset most people never measure, yet it determines everything about how calmly and intelligently you move through financial challenges. When you have time, you negotiate better, you choose better, you recover faster. Cash gives you that luxury. Without it, even small problems become overwhelming. The fourth lesson is perhaps the most overlooked. Cash buys choices. And choices are the real currency of freedom. When you have cash, you're not forced into desperation. You're not trapped in a job you hate because you can't afford a break. You're not accepting unfair terms because you're cornered. You're not taking out loans at terrible rates because you have no alternative. With cash, you make decisions from strength instead of fear. You choose what aligns with your values instead of what aligns with your panic. You get to walk away from bad deals, from bad employers, from bad timing. That freedom is worth more than any short-term return you could earn from over-investing every dollar. People who have choices sleep better. They make better decisions. They avoid situations that drain their energy and destroy their peace. Choices aren't purchased with income, they're purchased with liquidity. The fifth lesson elevates everything we've discussed. Patience is a financial advantage that grows in value over time. People misunderstand patience. They think it means waiting passively, doing nothing. But true patience is active. It means preparing while you wait, learning while you wait, building while you wait. It means having the discipline not to jump at every shiny opportunity that promises fast returns. It means resisting the emotional impulse to chase what everyone else is chasing. And cash is the backbone of patience. Without cash, you can't afford to wait. You can't afford to sit still. You can't afford to be selective. Cash gives you the ability to wait for opportunities that are unmistakable instead of settling for the ones that merely look convenient. Cash transforms the uncomfortable moments of waiting into strategic moments of observation. And the people who build real wealth aren't the ones constantly moving. They're the ones who move with intention. Now here's the part that ties all of these lessons together. Cash is not a financial tool, it is a behavioral tool. It shapes how you think, it shapes how you react, it shapes how you make decisions in stressful moments. And those decisions define your financial life more than any investment ever will. People think wealth is built by chasing high returns, but wealth is built by avoiding irreversible mistakes. And cash protects you from those mistakes. It shields you from panic selling. It shields you from bad debt. It shields you from financial desperation. It shields you from the emotional roller coaster that destroys discipline. Wealth isn't a sprint. It's a long-distance walk. Cash is the solid ground beneath your feet. Without it, every step feels unstable. Another lesson emerges once you reflect on the patterns of people who remain financially steady through every cycle. These individuals aren't obsessed with optimization, they're obsessed with resilience. They understand that markets rise and fall, incomes change, life is unpredictable, and the unexpected arrives at inconvenient times. So they don't build their financial systems for perfect conditions. They build for the storm. They build for the unexpected. They build for the inevitable moments when the world becomes chaotic. And because they build for the chaos, they remain calm when the chaos comes. That calmness is not a personality trait. It is the result of cash structure. And here's the final lesson, the one that might shift something deep inside you. Cash isn't about being rich. Cash is about being ready. Ready for emergencies, ready for opportunities, ready for uncertainty, ready to protect your future even when the present becomes difficult. People who hold cash aren't pessimists. They're realists. They accept that life doesn't always follow a stable trajectory. And by respecting that reality, they create stability for themselves long before life tests them. These lessons aren't rules to memorize. They're habits to absorb. They change you slowly. Then suddenly, they make you less reactive and more intentional. They give you a sense of control you didn't even realize was missing. And once you internalize them, your entire relationship with money feels different. But lessons only matter when combined with the deeper philosophy behind them, the philosophy that shapes how you think about money, time, choices, and stability. And that deeper understanding is where we're headed next. A philosophy that makes cash feel different. There comes a point in your financial life when numbers stop being the main story and your mindset becomes the real engine behind every decision you make. Cash isn't just a tool you hold, it's a mirror that reflects what you value, how you think, and how you behave when the world stops cooperating. Think about this for a moment. Every major financial problem feels worse when you feel cornered. Every unexpected bill feels heavier when your options are limited. Every market downturn feels scarier when you don't have a buffer. Cash doesn't eliminate uncertainty, but it changes your relationship with it. It gives you breathing room when life tightens. It gives you clarity when emotions rise. It gives you strength when circumstances challenge you. It doesn't promise returns. It promises resilience, and that promise becomes more valuable the longer you stay in the game. People often misunderstand what real financial confidence actually is. They think confidence comes from high income, from having the right investments, or from timing the market perfectly. In reality, financial confidence comes from knowing you can withstand impact. It comes from knowing a single setback won't undo everything. It comes from knowing you're not one emergency away from spiraling. Confidence isn't created by external conditions, it's created by internal stability. And internal stability starts with liquidity. Cash doesn't make you wealthy by itself, but it shapes the mindset that allows people to become wealthy. It lets you think long-term instead of scrambling short-term. It lets you make thoughtful decisions instead of emotional reactions. It lets you avoid situations that destroy years of progress. If wealth is a long journey, cash is the steady ground beneath your feet. Without it, every step feels shaky. There's a deeper emotional truth underneath all of this. Cash gives you permission to slow down. In a financial culture obsessed with speed, constant movement, and never wasting a dollar, slowing down feels uncomfortable. But slowing down is where wisdom lives. When you're not forced into urgency, you start seeing opportunities more clearly. You recognize real risks instead of imagined ones. You stop chasing every shiny idea that promises instant returns. Cash allows you to breathe long enough to separate noise from value. And in a world overloaded with noise, that separation is everything. You start recognizing which decisions truly matter and which ones are distractions. You start prioritizing your long-term trajectory instead of your short-term impulses. That shift doesn't happen suddenly. It happens slowly through the quiet confidence that liquidity provides. Another part of this philosophy is understanding that patience is power. Not passive, defeated patience, but intentional patience. The kind that refuses to be rushed by trends, fears, or other people's excitement. When you have cash, patience becomes easier because you're not acting from desperation. You're not praying for the market to cooperate. You're not sprinting to fix a mistake you made under pressure. Instead, you sit at a distance from chaos. You observe, you learn, you wait for clarity. That waiting isn't weakness, it's strength disguised as stillness. And here's the twist. The world rarely rewards patience publicly, but it always rewards patience privately. The quiet decisions you make while you wait, the decision not to panic, not to overreach, not to take unnecessary risk, those are the decisions that compound into long-term stability. Cash also teaches humility, which is one of the most valuable financial traits you can develop. It reminds you that you cannot predict everything. It reminds you that you do not control the timing of life. It reminds you that the world doesn't follow your plan. That humility doesn't make you fearful, it makes you realistic. And realism is the basis of durability. People who ignore humility take on too much risk during good times and collapse during bad times. People who embrace humility build systems strong enough to survive both. Cash is the physical expression of that humility. It says, I don't know what will happen next, but I know I'll be ready. That readiness is far more powerful than pretending you can forecast the future. And here is the heart of the entire philosophy. Cash is not about protecting you from life. It's about protecting your character when life becomes difficult. When you have liquidity, you don't panic. You don't betray your long-term goals to fix short-term emotions. You don't abandon your values out of fear. You don't make decisions that future you will regret. Cash keeps you rational when everything around you tries to make you irrational. It keeps you steady when the world becomes unpredictable. It keeps you grounded when pressure pushes people into chaos. That steadiness is not something you can buy. It's something you build. And cash is the scaffolding that supports it. Once you see cash through this lens, as time, clarity, patience, humility, and character, your entire financial life becomes easier to navigate. You stop treating money like a sprint. You start treating it like a series of deliberate steps. You stop measuring progress by how quickly things grow. You start measuring progress by how calmly you handle challenges. You stop chasing excitement. You start chasing endurance. And enduring is what actually creates wealth. With this philosophy in mind, we can finally bring the conversation full circle, because everything we've explored leads to one final practical question. What should you do next? That answer, and the closing thought that ties this entire journey together, comes in the final section, the moment you take control. If there's one message to carry with you after everything we've explored, it's this: cash isn't about being rich. It's about being ready. The amount you hold, the way you organize it, and the discipline you build around it becomes the difference between reacting to life and directing it. Think about this for a second. When you have liquidity, you breathe easier, you choose better, and you move through uncertainty with confidence instead of fear. That shift alone can change the entire rhythm of your financial life. So if you're committed to finally taking control of your cash in 2025, start by building your structure, define your tiers, and give every dollar a purpose. And if you're leveling up your financial mindset this year, drop a comment saying, I'm leveling up, because the journey always begins with a single intentional step.